Power to the people. Jeremy Corbyn pledges to take on the establishment. The Labour leader insists the general election is not a foregone conclusion and vows to tackle what he calls a rigged system.
It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail.
On day 3 of the election race, Theresa May stands by her commitment to limit migration.
We want to see sustainable net migration in this country. I believe that sustainable net migration is in the tens of thousands.
And the former UKIP MP Douglas Carswell says he won't be standing and urges people to vote Tory. Also tonight, the new drug scientists hope could combat dementia. And fans rally round the young motorsport star who lost both legs in a crash.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn today pledged to be the people's politician and end what he called a rigged system set up by the wealthy for the wealthy. In an impassioned speech, he said the general election is a straight choice between the Conservatives' party of privilege and Labour fighting for everyone. Mr Corbyn insists a big Tory victory is not inevitable. But even one of his own MPs doubts his chances, telling ITV News today the Labour Party is just trying to limit its losses. From Westminster, here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina.
The next Prime Minister of the UK, Jeremy Corbyn.
No doubt that's how his supporters see him, and according to the man himself, there's still everything to play for. But if that involves tacking towards the centre ground, there was no sign of it today, none whatsoever.
It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail.
He would take on what he called a rigged system.
I don't play by their rules. And if a Labour government is elected on the 8th of June, we won't play by their rules either.
Who exactly was in his sights?
If I were Southern Rail, or if I were Philip Green, I'd be worried about a Labour government. I really would. If I were Mike Ashley, or the CEO of a tax-avoiding multinational corporation, I'd want to see a Tory victory. I really would. Why? Because those are the people who are monopolising the wealth that should be shared by each and every one of us in the whole country.
His Labour audience loved it, but not a question about his calamitous poll ratings.
You say that you want to speak for the many, not the few, but your poll ratings of something like 14 or 15% suggest that only a very few people believe you, and you've attacked the elite. Aren't you effectively just part of an Islington elite that doesn't reflect the views of people around the country?
You very helpfully mentioned the opinion polls, and I'm really grateful to you for that. It was really kind of you, and I'm really pleased about that. All I can say is, in 2015, almost exactly 2 years ago, I was given 200 to 1 as an outside chance.
But one MP today openly questioned whether he had any chance this time.
I don't think that this election is about changing the government.
Prime Minister.
I think this election is about preventing the Tories from getting such an overwhelming majority that there is no possibility of dissent in this country.
Hardly a ringing endorsement. Jeremy Corbyn, though, insists Labour is stronger than it's ever been. It's still far from clear his anti-establishment pitch really will resonate with voters.
So, Libby, then what is your assessment of the Labour leader's speech?
Well, this was a much more impassioned performance from Jeremy Corbyn than we've seen before. He looked like a man on a mission to prove that he really does have a chance of winning
this election. But in another sense, it was really just vintage Corbyn. He didn't stray very far from messages he's put out before. There was no attempt really to tack towards the centre ground, and barely any mention of Brexit. He dodged a question as to whether there should be a second referendum, only for his spokesman to clarify later on that Labour didn't believe there should be one. And I think not having a clear message on that could be very dangerous indeed.
Well, Libby, also today, a pretty extraordinary development in a contest involving one of Mr Corbyn's main backers. Explain.
Yes, well, Len McCluskey, the leader of Unite, has been one of Mr Corbyn's staunchest allies. He's currently in the middle of a leadership contest and his main opponent, Gerard Coyne, has just been suspended. The votes are being counted tomorrow. Mr Coyne was suspended, it's alleged, for saying things about Mr McCluskey which were unfounded, and also for using Labour Party data. Now, we don't know what Mr Coyne is going to say to those allegations, but it does cast huge uncertainty over the outcome of this election and does raise the prospect that Mr McCluskey may stay in place.
All right, Libby Vina at Westminster, thank you. Well, meanwhile, the former Labour Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls will not be standing as a candidate in his old seat of Morley and Outwood. His defeat in the West Yorkshire constituency 2 years ago was one of the defining moments of the last election. It's not clear whether he's planning to stand for Labour elsewhere. Theresa May tonight recommitted the Conservative Party to keeping net migration within tens of thousands a year. She said leaving the EU would enable Britain to control its borders. The controversial figure is the same one promised, of course, by her predecessor, David Cameron. But he failed to achieve it, and neither has Mrs May, either as Prime Minister or in her time as Home Secretary. Here's our political correspondent, Paul Brand.
For all Prime Ministers, there's nowhere quite like a factory to make a batch of pledges. But if the radars they produce at this one in North London could detect a broken promise, well, Theresa May would show up loud and clear, as she committed yet again this afternoon to this target on immigration.
We want to see sustainable net migration in this country. I believe that sustainable net migration is in the tens of thousands. Leaving the European Union enables us to control our borders in relation to people coming from the EU, as well as those who are coming from outside the EU.
So for a third election, the Conservatives will hold that promise up to the British people. Even though since David Cameron first made it in 2010, net migration has never fallen below 100,000, sometimes reaching triple that. And this morning, as Theresa May met the President of the European Parliament to discuss the rights of foreign nationals, one minister had seemed to suggest the pledge on their numbers, never delivered by this former Home Secretary, might be dropped.
I said I didn't want to get into the numbers. What I'm interested in is making sure we have the right immigration system, we have the right controls on our immigration system, and that we control our borders.
But we now know Conservative MPs must once again defend that target.
No, I think if we're taking back control over our borders and over our immigration policy from Brussels, and if you look at what we've done over bogus colleges, strengthening law enforcement in relation to illegal immigration, we'll be in a position then to control the overall volume.
And with this election already in full spin, we now know the first of Theresa May's pledges is one she has already broken. Paul Brand, ITV News.
Well, the Conservatives' hopes of taking votes from UKIP got an unexpected boost today. Douglas Carswell, who was UKIP's only MP, says he will not be standing in June. And what's more, he says he will be voting Tory. Angus Walker is in his constituency in Clacton in Essex. And Angus, tell us, how significant is this?
Yes, we're on Clacton seafront, and this is where UKIP really came ashore in Westminster terms as a political party when Douglas Carswell, the Tory MP, defected to UKIP. He held the seat for UKIP at the 2015 general election. Then things got messy. He fell out with Nigel Farage, fell out with Aaron Banks, the multi-millionaire backer of UKIP. Then he said last month he was going to sit as an independent. Now he says he's not going to stand. And furthermore, he's urging millions of UKIP voters to back the Tories.
I hope that many of the 4 million people who voted UKIP at the last election will make the journey that I've made, which is to recognise that we did it. We made sure we had the referendum. Now we can get back to other parties, and in particular the one party that's going to deliver that referendum.
One UKIP councillor telling me today that Douglas Carswell had stabbed them in the back, and Aaron Banks, the multi-millionaire donor, showing his distaste for Douglas Carswell, using Trump-like language in a tweet saying the Clacton swamp has been drained without a shot fired. Now for the Clacton plan. He says he may stand here. There will be a battle between the Tories and UKIP here. It will be symbolic. If the Tories win, they will say that they have driven UKIP back into the sea.
OK, Angus Walker in Clacton, thank you. OK, so let's move on to other news now. And scientists have made what could be a significant step forward in the treatment of dementia. Two existing drugs appear to have halted the disease in its tracks and even stopped the brain from shrinking. Now, so far, they've only been tested on mice, but as the drugs are already licensed, their effectiveness could be known within 2 years, as Martha Fairley reports.
The job I loved, I wasn't capable of doing anymore.
Joy Watson spent a lifetime caring for dementia patients, but on her 55th birthday she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease, and in the 3 years since she's seen her condition deteriorate.
Just down to little things like forgetting, did I clean my teeth, didn't I? To major things like, you know, I can't go walking on my own, which is something I loved. And I feel quite restricted, but at the same time I'm determined not to let the dementia beat me.
But now scientists at the Medical Research Council have identified 2 existing medicines that could help stop or slow down that neurodegeneration. Using mice with brain conditions similar to Alzheimer's, they tested 2 repurposed drugs with remarkable results, reversing the signs of disease. And because one of them, trazodone, is already used as an antidepressant, it's speeded up the search for a treatment that's ready for clinical trials.
Oh, I mean, developing a new drug could be 10, 20 years from ploughing your way through making millions of compounds or many, many compounds, testing their safety, their solubility, their entry into the brain. These were ready, so it took us the 2 or 3 years that it took us to do the experiments to validate them in mice.
In patients with dementia, the build-up of faulty proteins in the brain triggers a natural defence mechanism. This defence prevents production of other essential proteins needed for brain cell survival, causing the brain to shrink as old cells die. But researchers have found that in mice, these 2 drugs override the defence mechanism, restoring that vital protein production and slowing down or halting the onset of dementia.
So if you were able to sort of stop your Alzheimer's where you are right now?
Yeah, if I could stop the deterioration here and now, that for me would be amazing.
And while it won't be a cure, this could be the breakthrough that changes the future for thousands of dementia patients like Joy. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, why there's trouble in store for high street chain Debenhams, and more than £500,000 raised for the teenage motor star who lost both his legs in a crash. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Hello again, welcome back. 2 drug addicts are tonight facing years behind bars over the torture and death of their 4-month-old baby girl. Jeffrey Wiltshire and Rosalind Baker tried to cover up their crime by taking baby Imani's body on board a London bus and pretending that she had only just stopped breathing. In fact, she died from terrible injuries, as Paul Davis reports.
It's an apparently innocent scene. A father pushes his baby's buggy onto a bus, kisses the child's mother and gives them a thumbs up as the bus pulls away. But all is not what it seems here. This is part of a charade designed to hide the most appalling cruelty. A short time later, the mother, Rosalind Baker, tells fellow passengers on the number 25 bus there's something wrong with the baby. One dials 999.
What's happening with the baby? The baby is not responding and the baby was okay. The mom said the baby was okay, but now it's not responding.
Can you feel or hear any breathing?
No.
Passengers give CPR in a desperate attempt to revive baby Imani. Through it all, the infant's mother seems surprisingly calm. She knew the child was already dead. An Old Bailey jury has found that Rosalind Baker and her partner, fellow drug addict Geoffrey Wilshire, took 16-week-old Imani onto the bus to hide the real cause of her death, when in fact at the house they shared in Newham, East London, the baby had suffered 40 rib fractures and terrible head injuries in her short and painful life.
It involves very cold, calculating cynicism on their part, and it shows the way in which they've acted together in trying to cover up the way in which the child died.
The police today praise the strangers who tried to save a child, not knowing she was beyond help.
It must have been horrendous for them, and some of them were in, a terrible state afterwards. But I must, pay credit to them that they displayed the sort of decency and humanity towards Imani after she was dead, sadly, that seems to have been lacking during her short life.
Baker and Wilshire will now be sentenced for causing or allowing their baby's death, a crime that carries a maximum sentence of 14 years. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Police may now have to shoot terrorists who are using vehicles as weapons, according to the officer in charge of armed policing. Simon Chesterman said tactics need to change in light of the Westminster attack. Officers were previously told not to shoot drivers because of the additional danger it might pose. There was a warning today that police in England and Wales are increasingly being used to plug gaps in mental health care. The Chief Inspector of Constabulary says too often they're being used as the first resort, putting an unacceptable strain on forces and putting lives at risk. And London Underground workers are to stage another 24-hour strike. Members of the RMT union will walk out on May the 7th in a row over a sacked colleague. Now, more than 200 jobs are at risk at Debenhams after its new boss announced plans to close 11 warehouses and up to 10 department stores. It's all part of a turnaround plan to lure customers back, including cutting in-house brands and putting more staff into stores. Our business editor Joel Hills is here. So what's been going wrong then, Joel, with Debenhams?
Well, not just with Debenhams. Department stores in general have been having a tough old time of things. BHS went bust almost exactly a year ago. House of Fraser is finding it hard to just scrape a profit. And Debenhams is making money, but profits, which in the last 6 months, or up to March anyway, stood at £87.8 million, are actually in decline. So another turnaround plan. Up to 10 of the company's stores may close. The remaining 165 will be revamped. We're going to see the online experience improve. We're going to see stores decluttered, the number of stock lines dramatically reduced. The share price, though, today fell. One shareholder I spoke to was unimpressed. He told me there are still far too many stores. Tough decisions are being avoided in the face of tough online ferocious competition. Keep an eye too, Mary, on what Mike Ashley does next. The billionaire founder of Sports Direct doesn't hold any shares directly in the company. He has got investments which could convert, though, to a 16% stake if he chooses. If the company continues to struggle, he may make a move.
Now, as you said at the beginning of your answer, it's not just Debenhams that is suffering. It's not just Debenhams that's making cuts, is it?
No, it's not. Marks and Spencer today announced as part of their programme 6 stores will close. No job losses, though. If people want jobs, they can get them elsewhere. Changing shopping habits are being blamed for this. It's a reminder that although we've got these retailers with shops on every high street, in many cases, and in a digital age, they have more space than they need. We'll see more of this.
All right, Joel Hills, thank you very much. Moving on now, and more than £500,000 has been raised to help a teenage racing driver who lost both his legs in a horrific crash. 17-year-old Billy Munger was badly injured on Sunday during a Formula 4 race at Donington Park. He was put into a coma and had to have a double amputation. But after waking up, Billy says he wants to race again, as Richard Pallow reports.
The winner of the Ford F4 Challenge Cup. There's the check.
Billy Munger is a rising star of British motorsport, on top of a Formula 4 podium just a fortnight ago.
Because here's Billy Munger having a look through past his...
But in his very next race, held last Sunday, he was caught up in a high-speed crash that will change his life forever. The car in front had slowed down dramatically, leaving the 17-year-old who was in the green and white car behind badly injured. An eyewitness tells us it had just started raining.
One of the drivers just came around the corner and made an innocent mistake and spun onto the middle of the track. And unfortunately for him, Where he was, there was no way that he could get out of the way of oncoming traffic, and sadly for Billy, he was completely unsighted.
Surgeons in hospital were then forced to amputate both of Billy's lower legs. A fundraising page has already risen to well over £500,000. 15,000 of that donated by former F1 world champion Jenson Button, who on social media said, "Embrace the love from your family and friends during this tough time in your life. Get well soon, buddy." While Lewis Hamilton tweeted, "Thoughts and prayers are with you and your family."
When he first came out of the coma, he wasn't able to speak. But he fist pumped his mechanic Jamie, which was the first thing that he did, and which obviously put all our minds at rest.
Of the many expressions of support, few will be more valued than that of former soldier and now racing driver Davy Burrell. He lost his legs after an explosion in Afghanistan and is already offering to race alongside Billy in the future.
I'm out to achieve as well was be the first man to race Le Mans with prosthetic limbs. No one's ever done it before, and it'd be quite cool if we could get young Billy in the same situation along with us.
Billy himself is tonight undergoing further surgery. It may be a long time before he gets behind the wheel again, but you sense he surely will. Richard Pallo, ITV News.
Want to read more messages of support for Billy Munger along with the fundraising campaign? You can go to our website, itv.com/news. And finally tonight, if you think finding a few coins down the back of the sofa is lucky, take a look at this. 913 gold sovereigns were discovered inside an old piano by a tuner in Shropshire. They date from 1847 to 1915. Their value is estimated at around £350,000. Well, today a coroner ruled the find was treasure, and that means it's property of the Crown. But both the piano tuner and the instrument's owner will get a reward from any sale. Music to their ears, no doubt. Now, just before we go, one bit of breaking news on the general election. Former UKIP leader Nigel Farage has just confirmed that he will not be a candidate at this election, and he warns, in his words, the Conservatives are heading for a landslide. More details on our website, itv.com/news. And that's all for now. Tom's here at 10:30 after the nightly show, but from me and all the team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.